Well, I thought I'd started this off really great, but apparently, anybody want to guess what that is? That's me messing up and not freezing my transforms before I parented stuff. Luckily, there's a really easy fix for this. So I just have to unparent everything. So I'm going to unparent and then freeze my transforms and reparent. Here we go. Voila! Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and set up the constraints, and I'm going to constrain everything to the joints. And so this is kind of a grind to get this to do this. The only thing I'm going to point out is I'm going to attempt to parent constrain this lid to the box, right? So I'll do one of those in slow-mo and kind of walk you through, and because that'll be the complicated one, but everything else has been pretty much just the standard parent constraint to joint, parent constraint to joint. I'll record the video and show it to you, but it's going to be super, super fast. So first up, I'll just do one of these. So the first thing I want to do is I want this to follow this. So I'm going to embed, this is the parent, this is the child. Okay, but you have to remember that I'm using these rotation offsets. So this somehow got parented because I didn't unparent the lid, this one. See, the rest of them are fine, but I'd forgotten to do this. I'd forgotten to unparent it, which is why it was the lone one sitting down there and the way I figured it out. So I'm going to now, same scenario, remember, I'm going to lock these because we can't freeze the transformations, and I'm going to parent it underneath the harness control. There it is. And then I can just middle mouse slide it up so I can see it better. All right. So now, remembering the rotation offsets, the question that usually comes to mind is, do I parent constrain the rotation offset to the curve or the curve to the curve? Well, you want it to follow its position. So when this thing moves, this thing moves. So actually the curve in this particular case is going to be the parent, not the rotation offset. But this, it's going to be the rotation offset that's the child. So I'm going to parent constrain the curve to the rotation offset here. This to that. Now watch what happens when I try to do this. It gives me an error. The reason it's giving me an error, if you look in the script editor, is destination is locked. So remember how I said, hey, lock these? So what you have to make sure that we do with the lids is unlock the lids. All right, so now watch. Parent, apply. And because I have maintain offset on, when I select this one, so I can move this freely, all right, and rotate this open and it will stay rotated where it's supposed to be. Make sense? All right, so then let's put everything back to 0. There we go. And then in terms of constraining to the joints, remember that the joint is the parent, or rather the curve is the parent and the joint is the child, right? So now when I pull this, the geo is falling. And you're asking yourself, well, why did that geo? Well, because the joint is parented, right? But if I now move this, that's not going to move because this isn't parent constrained to that. So curve, joint, and if I grab this curve and move, hey, look at that. And I grab this curve and move, hey, look at that. And everything is zero based. And if I grab this, it all moves just nice and dandy. So this was the most complicated part of the constraining process, this lid in the box here. So I'm going to go ahead and knock out the rest of the constraints, and then we'll talk about it on the flip. Here I go. Uh-oh. Check it out. Looks like I forgot something. Seems to have forgotten one of these when I was selecting my joints and I put that on there. No big deal. I just gotta launch my control doc script. Okay, looks like I've got it all completely bound. All right, so for the next step, it's all parent constrained, it's rigged, it's ready to go, everything is zeroed out. The next big one is going to be really kind of adjusting the weights. And so I'm going to use a function of NGskin tools. That's basically a multi-function smooth. That's going to make these transitions look a lot better, especially here. You can see how it's really kind of holding it really tightly to the joint. I want this to fall off much more gracefully, so it feels more curvy for when I go ahead and kind of move it around. All right, so that's what's coming up next. Now we're going to start talking about a little bit about binding and some of the paint weighting ability, paint weight type stuff. NGskin tools, he's got a lot of really nice documentation. There's plenty of alternate tutorials on it online, of course. So I'm only going to run over a few little things that I found to be really, really helpful, and I would still suggest that you all kind of do your research and kind of look around. His version 1 product versus the version 2 product, some people have said that version 1 is better, some people say version 2 is better, or there's some more bugs. I've not had as many issues with version 2 as some people have had, but I'm not a pro user at this thing either. So take this for what it is. It's just basic workflow stuff. I'm currently using evaluation non-commercial license, so it's really just for educational. And do keep in mind that if you were going to use this professionally or for any kind of monetary gain, you definitely need to support him, because this tool is a lifesaver. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is launch the tool, and by clicking his button. Now, sometimes what will end up happening the first time you launch is that it takes a little bit to come up, so be patient. Once you've got the tool open, you need to set up the concept of skinning layers. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into what all this means, but essentially, if you think about NGskin tools as like Photoshop layers for paint weighting. So it allows you to create non-destructible variations of paint weight so that you're able to kind of experiment and play. So I'm just going to initialize that. So now this just shows me every joint that's associated with this mesh. It also has a mask kind of layer. This mask layer is sort of acts like the layer mask function in Photoshop. So you can paint all of these any way you want, but then you can also, on top of those paints, you can mask out sections of it. What I want to do is basically for this harness is I just want to smooth the living hell out of the weights. Well, I'm not going to mess with my base weights. I'm going to keep it as a layer. And I'm just going to right click over top of it, and I'm going to duplicate and make a complete duplicate. And you'll notice, hey, wait, where did it go? Nothing happened. There we go. And I'm going to call this super smooth. Just because I know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of these, and you can select all of them, and I'm going to paint. This comes on. Hey, look, flowery colors. What I want you to notice is this thing down here for this technique that I'm about to use. It's called brush iterations. When you click smooth, this becomes available. So if you were to jack this all the way to 99, what this is going to do for you is it's going to create, it's going to basically repeat the function 99 times. So my smooth intensity is only at 0.2. So I'm going to literally say, I want you to do this 100 times at 1. So just so that we have a better understanding of, what this function's what it would look like, this is what this looks like currently. Notice I declicked, right? So that's what it looks like currently. All right. So if I come back on this mesh and I select it again, notice how it automatically brings it back up in the window. But if I click on this mesh, notice I haven't done anything for that yet. So it tracks it. Again, you have to go back into paint mode. I'm going to go to smooth, and I'm just going to hit flood. And you're like, whoa. So now maybe that was too much. So maybe I'll go and just undo it. I'm going to hit flood. So now if I come through and I start messing with this, does this move kind of how I think, like stretchy elastic type of nature that I want this harness to kind of have? Again, this isn't like a real cloth sim here. This is me kind of hacking the weights to be able to give me what I want. Can I get the level of folding that, I'm hopeful of? It looks like I can push it pretty good. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now let's try this one up here. So same thing, initialize skinning layers. Feels pretty good to me. Let's check the other ones. Oh, I must have forgot to constrain that one. Whoops. Never fear. And this will happen. You guys will notice as you're working, sometimes you will have forgotten something. It's something like a constraint. It's not that big of a deal. I don't have to go back to an earlier version to fix it. Ah, now look at that one. That one's really kind of taking a whole heck of a lot. And also, I want you to notice that the belts aren't that isn't following, the boxes aren't following that joint. You could also paint, you could do layers per joint. If you really, really, really wanted, you could do layers per joint, but I'm not gonna, really not gonna do that. The other thing I want you to notice is here, see how the weights are, this thing's supposed to stay in place, but the belt is sliding through it. See that? Well, I don't want that. So this is a perfect opportunity for where I can use a mask. So let me give you an example on the back belt, right? So I'm gonna go, if I turn this off, there it is. See, on, off. So I'm gonna duplicate my base weights again. I'm gonna put it above. Oops, you can parent stuff too, by the way. There we go. And I'm gonna call this back belt. Okay. Wink. Did I lose my smooth weights? Looks like it. That's bizarre. You know, it's nice and smooth. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix this right. So if I turn this on, it should snap, right? All right. So I'm going to paint a mask where I only want the weights to be affected here. And so in this case, I'm going to use this. I'm going to do 100% intensity, take it down to 1. And I'm going to flood. So you can use replace, and I want intensity to be 0, apply. So now you'll notice that there's no weights on the whole thing. So I've cleared the weights, right? So now I want to paint weights. And I'm going to smooth it. Now what's nice about this is I'm doing this on the mask. I'm not actually, see, look. So I've just kind of hacked this a little bit. So now when I move, I come back over here and I move this around, it pretty much holds it in place, which is really, really nice. So this piece will not feel like it's sliding through the belt. I probably could have tightened it a little better, but I'm never going to have any close-ups on that, so I'm not too worried about it. All right. So now I really want to think about this one and think about how these boxes do actually need to follow that control. So when it moves, they move. You know, but I also need to be able to, again, rotate these independently so that I can make a move and things like that. So this is going to be a constraint issue where I need to, again, I need to constrain the rotate offset of this curve to this. So this has to be parented right here to this. This has to be the parent that drives it, okay? So we're going to pause on the NGskin tools for a second. We're going to fix that, and then I'm going to come back and illustrate what we need to do with the NGskin tools to make this work. Okay, here we go. So it's that one, all right? So it's going to be front belt and that. Can't do it. Why? Because I've locked. All right, so I'm just going to unlock all of these because I know I'm gonna have to do it. So now all 4 of them should move. Hey, awesome. Okay, so I want to go back into this. I'm going to go back over to NGskin tools. And I'm going to actually use the same mask that I used for back belt, or I could make a new one, but I might as well use the same mask at this point for that. So now I'm just going to call this attachments. Paint, right? So now I'm going to say, okay, I need to think about how I want. Maybe I don't want 100%, or I'll use something a little smoother so it's not as bad. You know, but like, how is this thing attached to it? So if I want that to be much more, you know, stiff, so that it does kind of hold that, but it falls off, you know, maybe I want to even more stiff fall off, like over here. Maybe I want this to be dead straight. Again, this is one of those things where you can, you know, you can manipulate it, take it off, try, experiment, say, oh, I'm okay with that, or, you know, what have you. And, you know, it's undoable, which is wonderful. And, you know, notice what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit and then smoothing a little bit and adding a little bit and then smoothing a little bit. And I've found this to be pretty nice with this kind of process to get what I want out of it. All right, I feel pretty good about that. So now, like, hey, let's think about it. Like, oh, it's going to rotate. The belt kind of feels like, you know, it's got its own, even though it'd be going right through the belly, but, you know, it'll work. Let me check to make sure these feel like they're going to be okay. All right. And then let's make sure this works still just fine. And I always like to offset it from 0 and then like move bits and pieces that are supposed to be, you know, riggable. And I usually turn off these things, so I'm only selecting curves, just to get a sense of like, okay, yeah, it's gonna be fine. Yeah, all right, I feel like it's all gonna work. All right, so now I've got the weights painted on the harness. Yay, NGskin tools, thank you. And really, the next step is going to be weight painting on the body itself, using the same basic concepts. Here we go.